faking Tourette's syndrome, to winning followers' sympathy by requesting donations.
But I am choosing not to let this disease have me before it's time.
Emerald Rose Ackley, also known as TicsandRoses, turned neurological disorder into profitable entertainment, manipulating her viewers into believing her fake symptoms.
See you later.
While in another world, she looks completely normal.
Hello and happy Pride to all of our pagans and witches that are in the community. While I was trained as a priestess in my tradition, I currently use the term priestess as my...
Nonetheless, she could not hide the truth for long because after noticing all the lies, her own sister Jade exposed her on Reddit saying, "I don't believe Emerald has Tourette's syndrome," and they never showed any symptoms as a child. Jade even revealed that Emerald had a history of forging documents. That's why Emerald's trick of forging medical documents to try and prove that she has Tourette's syndrome didn't work after all.
Reasons.
But when it all crumbled, she played the victim as if she were bullied off the internet. She is definitely faking it. Her own family called her out and said she is lying. That says it all. This is the story of how TicsandRoses fooled 500,000 people, and how Reddit detectives caught her red-handed. Before the backlash, Reddit takedowns, and the headlines about faking a neurological disorder, there was just a woman in front of a camera looking like she was fighting her body to speak. Emerald Rose Ackley wasn't a renowned name in early TikTok, but her account TicsandRoses grew rapidly in late 2020 and 2021, built on a deeply specific kind of storytelling. In her videos, Emerald claimed to suffer from Tourette's syndrome.
We can do this. Wow! 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 That's my eye. What's that? What's that? What's that? What's that? It's makeup. Calm down.
A neurological condition that causes involuntary tics, sudden movements, or sounds that can't be controlled. The platform, known for short-form video and emotional immediacy, became her stage.
Beans! 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 Do you want a race? 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 Do you want a race?
At first glance, her content didn't seem malicious. She presented herself as someone trying to spread awareness about a misunderstood condition, and as it's a difficult condition, often misunderstood, and rarely portrayed accurately in the media, it made Emerald's account feel different, even brave.
It looks delicious.
Viewers saw her jerk her head sharply, yell out random words. In one video, she joked about lying in bed all night, sleepless due to tics. In another, she shared how tics could make her everyday life so difficult that she couldn't even wipe her face. These clips weren't polished or high production, and that's why they worked. She often spoke in a high-pitched, childlike tone, especially when her episodes escalated.
No, no, no. No, no, no. Don't buy that.
Rather than shy away from her condition, she leaned into it, even using it for humor. The internet responded with support, because the more vulnerable she appeared, the more followers she gained. I love watching these, so I find these sort of people so interesting. Like, what's going through their head? Another said. This is so relatable. My Tourette tic is doing the full Swan Lakes choreography on the spot. Viewers saw a young woman opening up about her condition in short, raw clips, and through all of that, she smiled. She made jokes about her symptoms. She rated her tics like they were part of a game.
The most common right now is Bee-Boo. Like that. I don't really mind that one too much, and it's kind of become the cat's nickname, because I like to Bee-Boo with the cat. I guess I'd rate that like a 7 out of 10.
She made funny voices and created montages where her condition seemed almost charming. That's what drew people in. The contrast between suffering and humor, pain and performance, felt unique. Her little smile after each one, because tics are fun, non-painful, and just so silly. The little proud smile after each one always gets me. As the account grew, people flooded her comments. Many praised her for her courage. Some said her videos helped them understand their own diagnosis better. Thank you for sharing. The world needs to see what it's really like with your condition. Others claimed they shared her videos to explain Tourette's to their families. In a space that often rewards shock value, Emerald's content managed to strike a balance between emotional storytelling and light-hearted content. But there were cracks. I love when she goes, "Wow, it's so adorable." But then, as suddenly as it had started to grow and gain attention, few viewers started noticing something odd. Her tics seemed too frequent, too exaggerated. They varied depending on the situation, and people familiar with Tourette's, either personally or professionally, noticed patterns that didn't sit right. This is so relatable. My Tourette tic is doing the full Swan Lakes choreography on the spot.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Oh.
Some tics seemed performative, almost timed for the camera. At moments when you'd expect her to be most distressed, she'd suddenly smile or giggle, or if she was in a crowded area, her tics would be lower and gentler as if fitting the situation. But for many viewers, something about Emerald's videos didn't sit right. Her behavior on camera varied drastically depending on the situation. One viewer pointed it out in the following words: "Isn't it crazy how her tics volume magically goes down when she's in public? In some clips, she appeared overwhelmed, her tics coming in bursts, accompanied by intense vocalizations and jerky movements. Yet in others, those symptoms seemed to vanish, and she accomplished making full-fledged videos without a single jerky movement."
Tourette Storytime Part 2. So, this morning, my husband was in the other room and cleared his throat, and instead of saying, good morning, or hi, or anything like that, instead I went to call the police! There's a man in... like that. Which may have been the funniest thing that my Tourette's has ever done.
The inconsistency was hard to ignore. People pointed to the makeup videos. Her eyeliner was always sharp and symmetrical. There were no smudges or signs that she had struggled while applying it, and people couldn't resist asking, what happened to the tics? If her condition was as constant and uncontrollable as she portrayed, how did she manage a flawless winged liner? These weren't isolated cases. There were also long-form live streams and clips of her speaking directly to her audience, where she appeared composed and lucid for extended periods with no signs of tics, vocal or motor. Some people offered an explanation that maybe the tics changed form for every individual, but to no avail.
I opened the door and she kind of stepped in and helped, and that was such an experience. Because I've worked with Aphrodite for years and I have an altar in my room, but to have her step into something like dyeing yarn of all things, but knowing that it was going to a devotional piece for someone that's followed her for years and years and years. And
that answer didn't satisfy everyone. Viewers started to question whether the symptoms were real or were faked for the camera. The contrast between her exaggerated behavior and content and the calm, controlled version of herself in other contexts only added to the growing doubts. Whenever she did a tic, she looked at the camera to see if it was captured perfectly and started and stopped at the perfect time. As soon as people started to figure it out, it was clear that the illusion was breaking and more people were beginning to confront it. She stops for the tics. People with tics don't stop with what they're doing, they're trying to continue. She always looks at the camera during a tic. Still, most people look the other way. When a licensed medical professional, an actual neurologist, questioned the authenticity of her behavior, he was met with hostility. Emerald's followers quickly jumped in, accusing the doctor of ableism and harassment. Questions piled up, pointing out, what if she really has those? The criticism wasn't subtle. People told him to stay in his lane. For a moment, it seemed like Emerald was untouchable. In one of her videos, she laughed during a moment where her tics became intense, which stirred another round of debates. They said the laughter didn't fit. It seemed out of place, not because someone with Tourette's can't laugh, but because it looked like she was acting and enjoying the performance. As more followers joined, the line between vulnerability and performance blurred even further. One moment that made viewers pause was when someone casually asked Emerald when her tics first started. Her answer was almost offhand. She said something like, "Oh, I started having tics around 6 or 7. At first it didn't sound unusual, but to people who were more informed, or even casually familiar with how Tourette's typically works, the response raised red flags."
so for me, my tics started when I was probably around 6 or 7, but they had been relatively minimal from then on.
Tics don't decide to show up at 7 out of nowhere, especially not in a vacuum. For many, Tourette's is a neurodevelopmental disorder, meaning it starts in early childhood, around ages 4 to 6. But the tics are often present in some form from the beginning. You don't simply wake up one day at 7 with a full-blown case of complex tics, and deal with it later on, as she continued saying in her video, and also conveyed that people can have verbal as well as physical tics, which was news to many. The way she framed it suggested it was something that just suddenly happened at a conveniently recallable age, and it didn't match up with what people with lived experience had gone through themselves. Several commenters mentioned this. They pointed out that if she truly had Tourette's, the signs would have been there earlier, or at least her story would include things like misdiagnoses or early childhood patterns. But her timeline felt vague, like something she decided on later to fit the narrative. Did someone say 67? Who's gonna tell her, aren't you born with tics? And how is your eyeliner so perfect? It didn't stop there. Another wave of questions emerged when people began noticing how perfectly patterned Emerald's tics were. Viewers started asking about her good tic days and bad tic days, curious if she had any way of predicting them. The clips that went viral or had the most engagement, that's when her tics seemed the most dramatic, the most unpredictable. Her explanation was that several factors influenced her symptoms, stress, lighting, noise, and emotions, but people weren't buying it.
Hello, 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 hello. Yeah, so for me, there's quite a few factors that go into if I'm going to have a good tic day or a bad tic day. It depends on how much I've slept, if I'm really stressed or nervous or excited even. And for me personally, it's also dependent on my pain levels because I also have fibromyalgia. And generally, if I have a really, really high pain day with that, I tend to have less tics. It's not always true, but that can generally be a good identifier for me.
Jokes started to appear in the comments saying things like, it depends on how much lying she wanted to do that day. Also, the presence of an audience is a big factor. It became a meme within her critic community. They weren't accusing her directly, but they were pointing out a pattern. The worst tics always seemed to happen when the cameras were rolling and never when they weren't. At one point, she even told her viewers that her critics were not to be trusted because they were threatening to leak IPS and find people at their homes, which was definitely not true. Her audience had questions she never seemed interested in answering, and when she did address them, the answers often felt deflective or conveniently vague. The more people asked, the less they felt they knew. And that was some time when the documents came. To reinforce her claims, Emerald allegedly shared screenshots of official-looking papers, but they raised more doubts than they solved.
So I know you've all probably seen the chaos happening on my channel, so I wanted to show a little bit of my last outpatient consultation. So I did do some redactions for, personal safety reasons. So make sure you guys can see that. So yeah, that's kind of what's going on with me.
Commenters pointed out several oddities. One document listed PTSD twice under the same section. Another used inconsistent fonts that didn't match the typical medical formatting. It's not even the PTSD twice at the bottom, why is, or space like that. Why is PTSD listed twice? Some forms said provider instead of doctor, and included details like left-handed that seemed irrelevant or out of place. Most records like this say provider, not doctor. Left-handed did it for me. I could believe a doctor writing that someone is pleasant because I've had similar things written, but why is left-handed there? A few even noticed that the phrase chief complaint was used, which in medical documentation refers to a patient's initial reason for seeking care, not a formal diagnosis. And most importantly, as one user said, anyone can print something like this out. Hey, so a chief complaint can be anything a patient states? It is not a diagnosis, hope this helps. Anyone can go on a website and get anything printed out. Rather than clear her name, the documents triggered more scrutiny. What started as scattered doubt soon turned into widespread skepticism. With every new clip, every new explanation, and every attempt to defend her narrative, more cracks appeared. The illusion was no longer holding up because people weren't just watching her now. They were analyzing, dissecting, and starting to see through the performance.
Wow, wow, wow. Never mind.
What the?
But what really cracked her picture and made people see what she really was the fact that Emerald Rose lived two completely different lives online. On TikTok, she was TicsandRoses, a woman suffering from severe Tourettes syndrome since childhood. But here's the problem. Emerald had another life online. What few knew, however, was that she also ran a successful side venture, Stardust Fiber Studio, a yarn dyeing business. On that channel, she appeared calm, collected, and entirely tic-free. Audiences in that stream didn't see sudden outbursts or involuntary movements. Instead, they saw the same Emerald calmly explaining color mixes, discussing logistics like dye times and shipping schedules, and answering customer questions in a steady, uninterrupted voice.
My name is Emerald Rose Quartz. While I'm relatively new to knitting, I've been a lifelong artist.
No tics, no interruptions, just a calm, composed business owner. Emerald, talking about yarn colors. When links between her Tourette's persona and her business channel started spreading online, many viewers were stunned. The woman who claimed to tic constantly was conducting a professional live stream for extended periods without a single visible symptom. She was deftly splitting her public persona into two halves, one that exaggerated illness for emotional effect, and another that projected competency and calm for commerce.
Hey everyone, I'm Emerald, the other owner of Stardust Fiber Studio. Rebecca, who usually runs this channel, is on vacation this week, so I'll be taking over. The videos might look a little different, but it'll be same old for the most part, so see you around.
In that moment, it didn't matter how sympathetic her TikTok presence was. The contrast was too obvious to ignore. People cross-referenced the two accounts. The TikTok where she yelled into the camera and twitched constantly, and the live streams where she was stable, composed, and professional. The fact that she never ticked during business hours became a flashpoint, because if her disorder was severe enough to disrupt every other aspect of her life, makeup, cooking, and speech, why was it mysteriously absent when she was selling products?
How's that talking to this?
I probably am.
Then compare to. And these weren't isolated moments. Her yarn business had dozens of videos, hours of footage, none of which showed her in the conditions she claimed defined her life.
It was for them being able to receive it. And so me as a priestess, that's so important to me to be able to still not only be a yarn dyer, but be a priestess in that way.
The problem got worse when people dug deeper. It turned out Emerald had also been posting yarn-related content on her TicsandRoses TikTok. She had uploaded videos where she showed off finished skeins, described color names, or promoted her shop.
Oh. Yum, yum, yum. No.
But she never mentioned Stardust Fiber Studio by name. She never said it was her company. To the casual viewer, it just looked like another aesthetic TikTok about art or fiber crafts.
Whoa! Whoa! In the pan.
In hindsight, this was deliberate. By separating the brand name from her personal TikTok, Emerald kept her identities compartmentalized. One was chaotic, broken, and in need of support. The other was competent, business savvy, and driven. She had full control over which version of herself the audience saw and when. And for a while it worked. Most people never made the connection. Her TikTok fans assumed the yarn content was a hobby. Her customers assumed the business owner was simply a quiet creative. The walls between those personas stayed intact until they didn't. Apparently didn't start knitting until the panorama hit, suddenly dying and selling yarn. Claims it's because if one loves what they do, they never work a day in their lives. It only took one viewer recognizing her voice on both accounts, then noticing that her tics vanished the moment the business camera rolled. That was the tipping point. The Reddit thread where the discovery was posted exploded. Screenshots were shared. Video timestamps were cataloged. People started going back to her yarn streams and watching them with new eyes, and what they saw was damning. Emerald didn't just behave differently, she behaved entirely normally. There were no facial twitches around tick attacks. She answered customer questions about wool blends while measuring dye with steady hands. She never once acknowledged any struggle or impairment. If someone had only seen her business persona, they'd have no idea she ever claimed to have a disorder. That was what made people so angry. Not just the discrepancy, but the clear effort to keep it hidden. Emerald never disclosed on TikTok that she was running a business, even though she posted about the yarns. She never admitted that she was capable of working long, uninterrupted hours. And by omitting that truth, she led her followers to believe a distorted version of her life, one where every day was a battle, and she needed help just to function. It's weird how they were all situation-specific, too. People actually believed she wasn't faking it? The reason she likely never performed tics on her business account is that it would have been bad for sales. Customers don't want to feel uncomfortable when ordering yarn. Business deals require a professionalism. As one viewer pointed out, she couldn't tick on selling her yarn videos because this would subject her to fraud charges. She knew that. And so, consciously or not, she kept the symptoms off camera, proof that she could control when and where they appeared. To critics, that was the final straw. Because if you can turn a condition on and off, it stops looking like a condition and starts looking like an act. Still, even when the Reddit threads started surfacing and videos were being timestamped and reshared, Emerald didn't come forward with an explanation. She never tried to reconcile the two sides of her online identity, but the damage was already done. Her TikTok page stopped growing. Comments began to fill up with skepticism. Her business, though still active, lost some of its previous goodwill. The illusion had shattered, and what replaced it was a troubling sense of betrayal. This is crazy. Some people need attention at any cost. What is she up to today? And you have perfect eyeliner. Right when the camera comes on. It's one thing for the internet to catch onto a lie. It's another when the people closest to you step forward and confirm what everyone feared was true. Emerald's elaborate act as TicsandRoses, an online persona centered on chronic illness, identity hardship, and vulnerability, began to crack when viewers compared her erratic symptoms across platforms. But what truly shattered her image was a comment that didn't come from Reddit sleuths, YouTube critics, or Twitter threads. It came from her sister. Her sister stated clearly, "I wanted to clear up some misconceptions and share my part. I am Emerald's sister, and we grew up together. Although we were raised non-denominational Christians, my mother, who is an amazing woman, and I have always been supportive of Emerald and miss them dearly." In a single sentence, the public perception of Emerald's background changed. The sister revealed they hadn't spoken to Emerald in years, not by choice, but because Emerald had cut off communication. They tried to reach out and stay connected, but nothing worked. The fallout from this message was damning, because in trying to clear up misinformation, Emerald's sister made it painfully clear that the persona Emerald had built online was at best selective truth, and at worst, outright fabrication. One of the most significant moments in her message came when she addressed the question of Tourette's syndrome directly. She didn't hedge. She didn't speculate. She simply said, "I don't believe Emerald has Tourette's, and they never showed any symptoms as a child." That one sentence erased months of TikTok content. If Emerald had never shown symptoms growing up, and if even her own family, who lived with her day to day, had never seen any signs, then where had it come from? More than that, the sister clarified that Emerald does have a mental illness, though she didn't go into details. She spoke with care, not cruelty. She wished her sister safety. She even extended an apology to those hurt by her actions, while acknowledging that it wasn't hers to give. But still, she stood firm. It's incredibly disrespectful to fake a mental illness for any reason. That framing hit especially hard, because up until that point, Emerald had always presented herself as a misunderstood victim, never a manipulator. But what her sister's post did was recenter the conversation. Not on whether Emerald was hurting from backlash, but whether she was hurting people first. Jade, her sister, clearly pointed out in a Reddit thread that she had never been diagnosed with any such disease. The mention of Huntington's disease added another layer. Emerald had previously alluded to her family having a genetic disorder, sometimes as a deflection, sometimes as emotional leverage. But her sister clarified, yes, their grandfather had late-onset Huntington's. Yes, their mother carries the gene. And Emerald had also been tested. And the result was positive. It's not that people had never suspected Emerald might be dishonest, but up until this point, most of the criticism was observational. Viewers had noticed the inconsistency in her tics. They pointed out contradictions in her stories, but the sister's post turned speculation into confirmation and made the situation, if possible, even worse. The sister never followed up. She didn't milk the situation for attention. She didn't drop more receipts or do interviews. She just spoke, clarified, and disappeared, which made her words all the more credible. For many viewers, what made the situation around Emerald Ackley so deeply unsettling wasn't just the deception. It was the damage it did to people with actual diagnosed neurological disorders. The representation of Tourette's syndrome on her platform was almost theatrical, which often turns into viral. But the cost of that virality wasn't borne by Emerald. It was borne by people who are actually living with the disorder in every day. This was my issue too. Wouldn't the ultimate in raising awareness be something like, yeah, I have a disability that impacts every part of my day-to-day, but I still run a business, have hobbies and interests, rather than keeping the disability in the shadow? That's the ultimate in othering. It gives the impression that having Tourette's is unprofessional, which is exactly something that people with Tourette syndrome are trying to combat. Parents of children with genuine Tourette's posted responses, expressing concern and frustration. They talked about how their kids had spent years battling stigma, being mocked, bullied, and misunderstood, only to see their very real condition turned into an internet persona. I really hope she ain't also lying about having fibromyalgia, because my mom has it and so do I, and it's no joke. One of the most glaring examples of this disconnect came from a video she filmed while allegedly visiting a dentist.
Sorry.
In the clip, Emerald pretended to struggle with holding back a violent tic and jokingly said she might bite the dentist. The scene was edited and captioned in a way that seemed intended to go viral, mixing humor with supposed distress.
Don't steal the teeth. Don't steal the teeth.
But for many in the Tourette's community, it wasn't funny. It was offensive. In reality, violent tics involving biting are rare, and to joke about assaulting a medical professional, due to a condition she likely didn't have, crossed a major ethical line. People were furious. Not only was she playing into harmful stereotypes, but she was also creating false expectations around how patients with Tourette's behave in public settings. The backlash wasn't limited to just medical misinformation. Emerald's popularity was following a dangerous trend. People, especially teens, mimicking tics on TikTok and other platforms to gain views.
No beans. Ooh. Not the beans.
What started as one creator building a massive following off alleged symptoms soon snowballed into a wave of self-diagnosis and imitation. Some creators began adopting tic personas, putting out content under the premise of having neurological or psychological disorders, even though they had no formal diagnosis or history of symptoms. People who had fought for visibility and respect felt betrayed. Several creators who genuinely had Tourette syndrome spoke out, explaining how isolating the condition can be, how exhausting it is to live with, and how disrespectful it felt to see it used as a content strategy.
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Catch a tiger. He's a... I don't know why they're laughing and like being like, oh, I can't believe I did this, haha. Like, it's not funny. And again, they rhymed it, which is, tics can respond to stimulus, as I said, and sometimes vocal tics will rhyme. But again, this only happens for me on a really bad tic day. And if I was making a video reacting to nursery rhymes or something, I wouldn't be like, oh my gosh, did you see that? Like, I wouldn't be laughing. It's not funny to have these tics that come out of your mouth. It's not funny to say things that you don't want to be saying.
What made Emerald's case so damaging was the authority she presented. She claimed to have been diagnosed. She showed fake medical papers. She even used specific jargon and words like comorbid PTSD, functioning tic days, provider notes, which made her seem credible to people who didn't know better. And that just made her more annoying to people who caught her for who she really was. Despite everything, Emerald kept posting for a while, defending her actions, ignoring criticism, and occasionally leaning deeper into the persona when it was profitable. But the public response never softened. The damage had already been done. Not only had she disrespected a vulnerable community, but she had also turned mental illness into entertainment. And once that line was crossed, there was no going back. What followed next was erasure. After months of scrutiny and allegations, Emerald Ackley didn't respond with an apology or an explanation. She disappeared. Her once booming TicsandRoses account, which had amassed millions of views and followers, began to vanish in pieces. First, the more controversial videos were deleted, then the compilation-style edits that had gone viral. Eventually, the entire profile was gone. Viewers who searched for her handle were met with a dead link. It doesn't feel like a win for Emerald to just delete TicsandRoses and pretend like it never happened. I would be happy to move on if we had any hint of accountability or regret on their part, but it certainly doesn't seem like it. Right now, it appears Emerald's narrative is, oh, they bullied me off TicsandRoses, so I'm done. Not, I'm so sorry for lying and promised to do better. That really bothers me. What do other people think? This might have also been due to the fact that haters were signing a petition regularly for Emerald to go. However, this lack of closure didn't go unnoticed. For many, it wasn't just the content itself that felt manipulative, but the refusal to address the fallout. She didn't post a video acknowledging the hurt she caused, nor did she clarify or apologize to the many people, especially those with real disabilities who had spoken out. The content was gone, but the damage lingered, and so did the questions. Was she banned, or did she leave voluntarily to avoid further backlash? TikTok offered no official comment, but rumors began to swirl on Reddit. But then, soon after, a second account popped up, low-key, under a different name, but viewers quickly recognized Emerald's face. In that brief reappearance, she posted only a couple of clips, carefully framed and devoid of any signs of Tourette's. She said nothing about the past, but within days, that account was deleted too. By now, everything that once tied her to her online persona had been scrubbed. Her side business, Stardust Fiber Studio, also stopped posting. The contradiction was part of what triggered so much suspicion, and ultimately, her online exit. Despite the disappearance, the conversations continued. Threads on Reddit's r/illnessfakers and r/TikTok cringe dissected every step of her rise and fall. Viewers who once supported her felt betrayed. Others who had called her out from the start felt vindicated. The name TicsandRoses became a shorthand for deception, often cited in videos warning about the dangers of performative illness online. Her digital trail today is limited to archived clips, duets from frustrated viewers, and discussions across forums. Her name still surfaces in conversations around medical misinformation, and her videos are used in content dissecting how dangerous social media can be when used to exploit sympathy. Emerald may have disappeared from the internet, but the questions she left behind still matter. If you want more deep dives into stories like this, where truth hides behind the screen, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications.